Hello to everybody, welcome to my class of engineering drawing. This is the first class. I'm uploading the lectures on sectioning of solids for today. And this is my setup here. So I'll be using a whiteboard and colored pens with different combinations to illustrate all the drawings on this whiteboard facility. I hope you will enjoy your classes at home and be safe from the coronavirus that is spreading. Dear students, today we'll cover the class on sectioning of solids. Uh, we'll be making the projections of the solids which will be sectioned by the cutting planes and which will be a solid which will be of a kind of a prism. It could be a pyramid, it could be a solid of revolution. Solid of revolution is a cylinder, it's a cone. So when the cutting plane is perpendicular to the base of the solid, it may at this point is parallel to the principal plane. What do you mean by this? It means that our cutting plane is perpendicular to HP, and on HP the base of any solid is resting. The base of any solid is therefore is on HP. The cutting plane is perpendicular to HP, and second we are taking into account parallel to the principal plane. So it means the cutting plane is parallel to the vertical plane. So if I assume any plane sheet of a square to be like this, if the board is the vertical plane and this floor is considered as the horizontal plane, so this my hand is taken as a cutting plane, and this will cut the solid like this, perpendicular to its base, and the surface of the cutting plane will be parallel to the vertical plane, perpendicular to the horizontal plane, like that. Alright?
So by this, now we understand that the cutting planes can have varieties. So the variety of cutting planes will be now explained to you, but before explaining it further, you must remember this, that any cutting plane which is cutting a solid perpendicular to its base may also cut perpendicular to the face of the solid. So this thing instead of base could be a face also. So now moving further, if we have to understand about the cutting planes, we have to understand about the orientation of the cutting plane with respect to the principal planes of projection. Our principal planes of projection are HP and VP. HP is called as the horizontal plane, VP is called as the vertical plane. So now we will understand what are the type of cutting planes that are available, which are used to cut the solid, and that solid is then projected in the two views, which are the front view and the top view. The front view is called as the front elevation, and the top view is called as the top plan. So let's continue about our chapter and understand what are the different type of cutting planes.
So students, these are the four kind of cutting planes that we have, and to start with I will explain
the basics before you proceed towards what is the type of cutting plane and what is its orientation with respect to HP and VP. The cutting plane will also take its position with respect to HP and VP, and before that we have to complete the first step towards the projection, that is making a drawing and orienting the solid with respect to HP and VP. All the concepts that you followed in the projection of solids will be followed in the first part in the sectioning of solids, and then when it talks about the cutting plane cuts the solid from this to that, parallel to this, inclined to this, perpendicular to that, then you have to take into account which is the type of cutting plane that the examiner is asking you about. Then you have to draw that cutting plane as per the given statement. So cutting plane 1 is the auxiliary vertical plane. Now you have to consider what is this type of cutting plane. You have to actually take its surface into account, and according to the statement it says auxiliary vertical plane is surface is perpendicular to the HP, inclined to the vertical plane. It means auxiliary vertical plane has its orientation when it aligns its surface perpendicular to HP and inclined to the vertical plane. It cuts the solid. So the examiner would be asking you in the statement, it cuts the solid perpendicular to HP, inclined to VP. So for example, in the first case, if the solid is resting on its base on the horizontal plane, it means any cutting plane which will cut the solid perpendicular to its base, because the solid is resting on its base on HP. So it will say the solid is cut by a cutting plane perpendicular to the base and inclined to VP at so and so angle. It means where the base of the solid is on the horizontal plane. So if the base of the solid is on HP, it means that the cutting plane has cut the solid perpendicular to its base, because base and HP are now one entity. Base is on HP, so perpendicular to the base and inclined to the vertical plane. Inclined to the vertical plane means it is making some angle with the vertical plane and it is cutting the solid. That type of cutting plane is called as the auxiliary vertical plane, which has its surface perpendicular to VP. It is cutting the solid, but it has its surface perpendicular to HP and inclined to the vertical plane. I hope you understand this. Next is the horizontal section plane. The horizontal section plane means we are not using the word auxiliary. To give you an hint, wherever in the cutting plane name the auxiliary word appears, it means the cutting plane is making an angle with the horizontal plane or it is making an angle with the vertical plane. Remember this is very important. If you have a word auxiliary in the name of the cutting plane, it means that the cutting plane is making an angle with the vertical plane or it is making an angle with the horizontal plane. To tell you more about this, it means if you have auxiliary vertical plane, it is making an angle with the vertical plane. If the name of the cutting plane is auxiliary inclined plane, it is making an angle with the horizontal plane. For auxiliary vertical plane, it is easy to remember. The word auxiliary appears in this name. So auxiliary means it is making an angle, but next to auxiliary is the word vertical, so it is making an angle with the vertical plane. But if you want to remember it for the other type of cutting plane, which is auxiliary inclined plane, you just have to remember it by auxiliary, which is making an angle, and inclined. We are not using the word horizontal here, I don't know why, but you can simply remember if auxiliary vertical plane is inclined to the vertical plane, so the second remaining cutting plane which has a name or word auxiliary is a plane which is making an angle with the horizontal plane. This way you can remember which plane is making an angle with which principal plane. Next we move on to the horizontal section plane. So horizontal section plane simply means that this cutting plane or this section plane which will section the solid is parallel to the horizontal plane. Now if the first word in the name of the cutting plane appears to be horizontal, it means that this cutting plane is parallel to horizontal plane and the surface is perpendicular to the vertical plane. It is obvious, if the surface is parallel to HP, on the other hand it will be perpendicular to VP, and if the surface is parallel to VP, on the other hand it will be perpendicular to HP. It is very obvious. So vertical section plane is the plane, and the word vertical appears in the cutting plane name. So it means if the vertical appears here, it means that this plane is parallel to the vertical plane and it is perpendicular to the horizontal plane. And auxiliary inclined plane, the surface is perpendicular to vertical plane and it is inclined to horizontal plane. I think this is enough explanation about this, and I have further drawn 4 animations or animated or pictorial views of the cutting planes, explaining how a cutting plane looks like when it is oriented with respect to horizontal plane and the vertical plane. So in the first example you can see the first, which is an auxiliary vertical plane. It is AVP, and this portion which is in red is actually the depiction of a cutting plane. So this line is parallel to VP and this plane is slightly at an angle to the vertical plane. So over here I have not mentioned the angle because it is already given in the statement, or it will be given in the statement, but here the cutting plane appears to be like this in the animation. For the second, which is the horizontal section plane, the surface of the plane is parallel to HP. This is the HP plane, and the surface is overall perpendicular to the vertical plane. For the third example, auxiliary inclined plane, the word auxiliary appears in the name. This means this has to be inclined with the plane. If the first example had already been inclined to the vertical plane, this will be, the remaining will be inclined to the horizontal plane. So in this name, auxiliary inclined plane, it means that the cutting plane, which is red in color, is inclined to HP. This is the HP and is perpendicular to the VP. When we simply say that the plane is inclined to HP perpendicular to VP, you have to include the word surface in the plane along with it. So it means that the surface is inclined to HP and the surface is perpendicular to VP. Last example is VSP. Vertical means if vertical is there, if the vertical word is here, it means it is parallel to vertical plane. The surface is parallel to VP and perpendicular to HP. So these are the 4 types of cutting planes that we will be using in the section of solids. And over here we have only shown the cutting planes. We have not shown the solids. So projecting a solid is the first step. Then you have to think about what type of cutting plane is to be used in the drawing, and then the last part is to actually show the sectioned part of the solid in the drawing, in the projections. And the projections are commonly, the projections are commonly called as the front view and the top view. So over here I have used only the first quadrant. Remember this, if the examiner asks you to answer it in the third quadrant, then you have to take these cutting planes in the third quadrant. It remains the same in the third quadrant. But if it asks you to do the sectioning in the first quadrant, then you have to do it in the first quadrant. And if it is not given in the question that you have to draw in which quadrant, then you have to assume it by yourself that you have to do it in the first quadrant. Alright, so further on the animations, I'll be drawing drawings through which it is explained that how to use these cutting planes. These are actually the pictorial views, but in actual drawing we don't use the whole surface of the cutting plane. We actually use a simple line. A line will tell us what cutting plane it is. A simple line will tell us if it is a AVP. A simple line will tell us if it is an HSP. A simple line will tell us if it is an AIP, and a simple line will tell us if it is a VSP. So this is completely magical. Through a single straight line, how will you differentiate between what type of cutting plane is being used in the drawing? Right? So this is not the actual drawing, this is only for your imagination and for your understanding. It is easy for you to remember what type of cutting plane it is, but in actual drawing I'll make you learn how to use these four kinds of the cutting plane. And now if I am making the use of lines, I'll be using them against a common line, and the common line is the reference line. Every drawing that we make is made with respect to a reference line, and that reference line is a XY line, and XY line is a continuous thin line. And so we'll be showing these four types of cutting planes on a reference line. Let's look how we do it. So we are here to make you understand by how to recognize a cutting plane just with the help of a simple straight line against a reference line. This was used when it was just to make you understand about how the cutting planes go about, but now these lines that you can see above them, these are the lines that we will be using in the actual drawing. Let's come to the first part. The first part was AVP, auxiliary vertical plane. Now AVP is marked here as HT. So all the cutting planes, when they are used in the drawings, they are recognized through their traces. Planes or the surfaces of the planes, when they are perpendicular to any principal plane, whether it is HP or VP. So this is the first angle, so this is HP, this is VP. If the surface of the plane is perpendicular to HP, it will make its horizontal trace on the horizontal plane. So this is how I recognize as an AVP, the auxiliary vertical plane, the cutting plane as AVP, because this plane has its surface perpendicular to HP, so it is making its horizontal trace on the horizontal plane. This is how I am recognizing a auxiliary vertical plane. which is a cutting plane. Now this is the line below the reference line on the horizontal plane that is making a horizontal trace, and this line is also inclined to the vertical plane. So it means this is the auxiliary vertical plane. In the second part, where the cutting plane is horizontal section plane, the surface of the cutting plane is parallel to HP. The surface is perpendicular to the vertical plane. I recognize this plane in the drawing by a straight line parallel to the reference line, and this straight line is making a vertical trace. Why it is making a vertical trace? Why? Because it is perpendicular to VP, and if it is perpendicular to VP, it must be a straight line parallel to the reference line, and it will make a vertical trace on the vertical plane. Now if I talk about the third part, this is an auxiliary inclined plane. So an auxiliary inclined plane has its surface inclined to HP and perpendicular to VP. If it is perpendicular to VP, what will it do? It will make a trace. It will make a trace on the vertical plane. It will make a vertical trace on the vertical plane. So this is, it means if this is a line which has its ends marked with the V and T, and this line is in the form of a long chain, thick line at the ends and thin elsewhere, which means the green markings are dark and the red marking and the red line is used to show that this is a thin line, not continuous. This is a thin line, chain line. It is forming a chain. This means that it is a cutting plane line. All of these lines are cutting plane lines. This HT, a chain line formation, thick at the ends, thin elsewhere, is a cutting plane line. This is also a cutting plane line representing HSP. VT is a cutting plane line parallel to the reference line representing an HSP. So it is, now you can make out you can actually compose a question out of this, an objective question. So the examiner can ask you, if a continuous thick at the ends, thin elsewhere line, if it is a cutting plane line and it is marked as V and T at both of its ends, and if this line is parallel to the reference line, so the examples, so the options will be given in the question as it is in the answers. So it will ask you that what type of cutting plane is this. So you have to answer among, if it is an AVP, if the line which is shown is an HSP, if the line which is shown is an AIP, or if it is VSP. So if you know the answer that an HSP looks like this, you can simply mark the correct answer. And if you don't know that HSP actually looks like this line, a straight line which is actually parallel to the reference line, you cannot mark any of the answer. It will get difficult for you. So making you understand how an AIP looks like when it is made in the drawing. This is the actual way you will be using all the cutting planes with the use of a cutting plane line in the actual drawing that you would be making in the drawing sheet. So an AIP has its surface perpendicular to VP, and when the surface is perpendicular to VP, it makes a vertical trace. And VSP has its surface perpendicular to HP, it will make a horizontal trace. So this is a straight line below the reference line, it is parallel to the reference line XY, and it has markings H and T at both of its ends. This is the representation of a cutting plane line, which is actually a vertical section plane. So this is how you will be using all of these cutting planes in the drawing. I hope you understand about this lecture today, and if you have any queries, would you please like to comment in the comment box section. Please leave your questions. I'll be happy to answer them back. And tomorrow we'll be switching to the first question from your assignments or the book or any book question, or if you have any questions, we'll be doing that. So for today I'll be signing off. Thank you for watching the content.